We're back for Your Ears Only. I'm David Alpern.
I'm Melissa Axelberth with a quote from the news. Major risks for the fragile housing market. That was Maryland's Democratic Congressman John Sarbanes in a letter to the House Committee on Financial Services on the growing number of domestic onshore oil and gas drilling leases, which may invalidate the mortgages of property owners if they have not first gotten an okay from their lenders. Now this.
Police methodically pepper spraying Occupy Wall Street protesters peacefully seated with locked arms at the University of California, Davis was watched by much of the world, and the video gone viral helped revive sympathy for the embryonic movement as both the weather and local government grew less hospitable.
Many still dismiss Occupy as too unfocused and unable or unwilling to carry out a practical plan for changing inequities in America's financial and political systems. But Harvard Business School professor Joseph L. Bauer reports that the complaints of the occupiers have some surprising overlap with those of business leaders around the world who worry about some self-destructive directions being taken by market capitalism.
Bauer and Harvard Business School colleagues Herman Leonard and Lynn S. Payne surveyed those leaders for a new book titled Capitalism at Risk, Rethinking the Role of Business from Harvard Business School Press Books. And Professor Bauer's on the line now for Your Ears Only. Welcome to our program.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Give us an overview of the complaints about the market system, American style, on which there's some agreement between the occupiers and international business leaders you surveyed. And then we'll talk about some of them in detail.
Well, I think that the business people have observed, we showed them forecasts from the World Bank going out to 2030, and what you can see is that the world continues to get richer. 800 million new people in the middle class. Capitalism is still serving its ends. But what seems to be happening is that as the poor get richer, gaps are growing larger between the middle class or the new middle class and the very rich. And the view of business leaders is that's a politically unstable situation. In effect, they predicted that there would be reactions such as the one you opened the discussion with. That if the people think that the system is rigged against them, then they're going to support political activity. The concern of business leaders is that the activity they want is going to hurt the system in ways that will hurt the protesters. In other words, it won't be intelligent.
Talk about the issue of environmental degradation in economic terms and where business leaders see that problem as most serious, the conflict between doing business at the least possible cost, best profit, and the larger environment.
I think you've picked probably the hardest place or an example of a problem that's very hard for business to deal with on its own. You can have firms, and many firms have learned that there's no trade-off between being clean and being profitable, and in their own world, they try and make progress. But it's a global problem, and we have to work on it at that level. You may know there was something called the U.S. CAP Coalition, a group of companies that came together in 2007 and tried, after a lot of negotiation, working with the major environmental groups to provide essentially the basis for appropriate cap-and-trade legislation. It was the legislators, the senators who left, I think, first to bail out with Lindsey Graham. And it's when the political support weakened that then the coalition came apart. But they were trying hard to put together, and some of the leading energy companies, the great villains, were part of that coalition, trying to see if we could not put together the basis for sensible legislation. But it's very difficult.
Well, in general, your book suggests that business should take a leading role in making the reforms that are necessary, but it raises the question about self-regulation becoming deregulation and then no regulation, with a likelihood of more short-term, quick profit policies like those that produced or at least abetted the big financial crisis.
There's no doubt that we have lots of examples of very short-sighted behavior by companies. What we're arguing is that you can companies that have thought through what's facing them will start to invest in a very different way. IBM's Smarter Planet program is completely predicated on the idea that they can provide the information platform for governments, for other activities that are trying to deal with really fundamental problems facing society, and they've made a lot of money doing it. GE's Ecomagination. I mean, people can be very cynical, but the truth of the matter is they're working to find ways of building businesses around these issues. China Mobile has built a huge business supplying information via smartphones to hundreds of millions of the rural poor in Western China. Cemex is doing a very good job of beginning to get housing for Mexico's urban poor. Cipla in India doing a good job of getting drugs at a lower price. And so there are examples of companies, but we need much, much more.
Do you think the Occupy movement has already had a significant effect on public consciousness, or is it just a temporary media phenomenon, mini Woodstock gatherings with financial chants instead of rock and folk songs?
Well, I certainly hope it's not the latter. I think what they've done is called attention to a lot of people that there is a really widening gap and that the income distribution today is very different than it was 15, 20 years ago. And I think that's all to the good, because I think people have, if they think about it, maybe they'll do something about it. One of the things we note in the book is the Committee for Economic Development, which began in 1942 of World War II. And you got eventually 3,000 committees around the country and 3,000 localities, business, working to figure out how they were going to employ people after the Second World War was over. Well, it turns out they did it. I think it would be wonderful if communities around the country on their own, with business leadership, and help try to figure out how we were going to employ the people who right now are having a terrible time finding jobs.
Harvard Business School professor Joseph Bauer is a co-author of Capitalism at Risk, Rethinking the Role of Business, from Harvard Business School Press Books.
Quote from the news, she was competitive shopping. That was Los Angeles Fire Captain James Carson on the woman who used pepper spray to set back other bargain hunters in a Walmart on Black Friday. For all Black Friday's insanity and ever earlier disruption of Thanksgiving Thursday, it may not even be the best day in the year to get great deals, according to University of Washington professor Oren Etzioni, whose number crunching confirms other observations that premium items go for less a week after.
Next, more on energy, politics, and the economy. Call it the Solyndra syndrome, for your ears only.